Imagine spending a decade fighting for someone's freedom, finally succeeding, rolling out the red carpet for their arrival, and then discovering they think you're a dog. Or possibly a monkey. Depends on the day, really. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where today we're unpacking the absolute masterclass in poor judgment that is Keir Starmer welcoming Alaa Abdel Fattah to Britain with open arms and a statement of delight, despite the minor detail that this bloke has allegedly called British people dogs and monkeys, advocated killing Zionists, including civilians, and expressed hatred of white people. But don't worry, the government says it's fine, totally fine. Nothing to see here. Just another day of Labour telling British Jews they don't matter, telling concerned citizens their fears are overblown, and telling everyone with functioning brain cells that security concerns take a back seat to virtue signaling. Buckle up, because this one's a journey through incompetence, cowardice, and the slow-motion car crash that is this government's approach to extremism. Let's set the scene properly, because the timing here is absolutely incredible, and not in a good way. Just 2 weeks before Starmer's delighted statement, 15 people were murdered on Bondi Beach in Australia, including a 10-year-old girl and a British-born rabbi. 15 people dead in an attack that sent shockwaves around the world. The Jewish community is reeling. Anti-Semitism is rising across Europe and Britain. Jewish families are questioning whether they have a future in this country. And in the middle of all this, Keir Starmer decides the appropriate response is to publicly celebrate the arrival of someone with a documented history of calling for violence against Jews. The tone deafness is so extreme, it's almost impressive. Almost. Alaa Abdel Fattah is a British-Egyptian dissident who spent almost a decade in Egyptian prisons for opposing the government there. He rose to prominence during the 2011 Arab Spring uprising that forced President Hosni Mubarak to resign. By all accounts, he suffered for his activism, went on hunger strikes, and became something of a cause célèbre among human rights campaigners. Both Labour and the previous Conservative government lobbied for his release. His family campaigned tirelessly. There was genuine persecution, genuine suffering, and that matters. But here's the thing. Being a victim of one form of oppression doesn't give you a free pass to advocate other forms of oppression. And that's exactly what Abdel Fattah appears to have done. Historical social media messages emerged, as they always do because nothing ever really disappears from the internet, showing Abdel Fattah calling for Zionists, including civilians, to be killed. Not Israeli soldiers, not government officials, civilians. Men, women, children, anyone who identifies as a Zionist. That's not political activism, that's advocating genocide. In other messages, he allegedly expressed hatred of white people and labeled British people as dogs and monkeys. Now, I don't know about you, but if someone called me a dog or a monkey, I probably wouldn't be rolling out the red carpet for them. I might not even let them through the door. But Starmer's response was to say he was delighted about his arrival. Delighted, that's the word he chose. The descriptor that Abdel Fattah is claimed to be an Islamist extremist adds another layer to this disaster. We're not talking about someone with mildly controversial views or opinions that might offend some people. We're talking about someone accused of holding extremist ideologies that are fundamentally incompatible with British values. And the government's response has been to essentially give him a personal endorsement from the Prime Minister himself. Starmer's statement wasn't just a bland acknowledgement that a British citizen had been released. It was effusive praise, gratitude to the Egyptian president for the pardon, tribute to the family and campaigners. It was a celebration, and that's what makes this so inexcusable. Abdel Fattah has claimed that his messages were taken out of context, which is the standard defense when problematic statements surface. And look, context can matter. Sometimes things look worse in isolation than they were intended. But we're not talking about one ambiguous comment that could be interpreted multiple ways. We're talking about a pattern of statements advocating violence, expressing racial hatred, and demonizing specific groups. At what point does taken out of context stop being a valid excuse? When you've called for killing civilians? When you've expressed hatred based on race? When you've dehumanized an entire nationality by calling them dogs and monkeys? The context would have to be pretty extraordinary to make any of that acceptable. The anti-Israeli messages endorsing the killing of Zionists and police were posted in 2012, which means they weren't some recent outburst or response to current events. They're over a decade old, which on one hand means they're historical, but on the other hand means this information has been publicly available for years. The European Parliament knew about them, which is why they withdrew a Peace Prize nomination from him. So when successive British governments lobbied for his release, this information was out there. It was accessible, it was known, and somehow nobody thought to factor it into their decision-making. That's not just an oversight, that's willful blindness. The Jewish Leadership Council, a charity representing Jewish organizations in Britain, criticized what they described as an effusive welcome from the government. Effusive is exactly the right word. This wasn't a careful, measured statement acknowledging complexity. This was Starmer going all in on celebrating Abdel Fattah's arrival. And the timing, coming just after the Bondi Beach massacre and amid rising anti-Semitism, makes it feel like a slap in the face to British Jews. They're watching attacks increase, they're seeing hatred normalized, they're questioning their future in Britain, and the Prime Minister is delighted to welcome someone who's advocated killing Zionists. The message that sends is devastating. Let's talk about Labour's decision to recognize Palestine because it's directly relevant to understanding the broader context here. The government positioned this as a principled stance, supporting Palestinian statehood and working towards a two-state solution. But critics, and there are many, see it as a choice of politics over peace. By recognizing Palestine without requiring any concessions or changes in behavior, Labour has arguably emboldened extremists who see it as validation of their position. And the consequences have been real. Anti-Semitic incidents have spiked, Jewish communities feel less safe, the political environment has shifted in ways that make hatred more acceptable. For more than 2 years now, demonstrations in support of Palestine have become a regular fixture in London. Thousands of people wearing keffiyehs marching through the streets, chanting slogans, waving flags. And while many participants are genuine in their concern for Palestinian civilians and opposition to Israeli government policy, these rallies have also coincided with an alarming spike in anti-Semitic incidents. Synagogues vandalized, Jewish-owned businesses targeted, Jewish students harassed on university campuses, Jewish families attacked in the street. There's been an upswing in hatred, and pretending there's no connection between these mass gatherings and anti-Semitic incidents requires ignoring overwhelming evidence. The upshot has been to fuel the fires of hatred. When you have regular mass gatherings where extremist rhetoric is sometimes tolerated, where calls for violence occasionally go unchallenged, when Jewish people feel unsafe in their own capital city, something has gone very wrong. Thousands of Jews found a home in Britain after the Second World War, refugees from the Holocaust and survivors of the worst genocide in human history. Britain wasn't perfect in its response to Jewish refugees, far from it, but it did provide sanctuary to many who had nowhere else to go. These families built lives here, contributed to British society, and considered Britain home. Their children and grandchildren grew up British, identifying with British values and culture. And now, decades later, they're turning their backs on the UK because they don't feel safe anymore. That should be a national scandal. That should be front-page news every day until something changes. But instead, it's treated as just another story, another statistic, another group complaining about something. The polling data is absolutely chilling. More than half of Jewish people in Britain feel they don't have a long-term future in the UK. Think about what that means. Over half of an entire community, people who were born here, whose families have been here for generations, believe they cannot stay. Almost half don't feel welcome in their own country. A clear majority have considered leaving Britain, citing the surge in anti-Semitism since the October 7th attacks of 2023, but also pointing to general prejudice against Jews in society and anti-Semitism in political parties. That last part is crucial because it's not just about random street violence or social media hate, it's about institutional anti-Semitism, the kind that's embedded in political structures and tolerated by people in power. British Jews blame the government, two-tier policing, and institutional cowardice for the appeasement of extremists. And can you blame them? When you see different standards applied to different groups, when some forms of hatred are vigorously prosecuted while others are ignored, when some communities get immediate police response to concerns while others are told resources are limited, This isn't paranoia or exaggeration. It's observable reality, and it's corroding trust in one of the fundamental institutions of British democracy. The campaign against anti-Semitism's warning about sliding into an abyss opened by fanatics is the perfect description of where we're headed. Fanatics, whether they're Islamist extremists, far-right nationalists, or any other flavor of hatred, thrive when mainstream institutions show weakness. When politicians lack the courage to confront extremism within certain communities, when police fail to enforce laws equally, when institutions that should be defending British values and protecting all citizens equally are instead picking and choosing who deserves protection based on political calculations, that's not justice, that's appeasement. And appeasement never works. It just emboldens those who see restraint as weakness. Welcome to life under Labour, where security concerns are secondary to looking progressive on the international stage.